Now that we've got everything from the front all done up, we have two major lines. One is the metal line, is the return line going back. Two is the 8AN line, also going back to feed the E85 to the front. Our biggest challenge yet, the whole fuel sending unit. This side is submerged in gasoline, this side goes out to the rear tire, which is why the sharp bends are right there. We're gonna reuse one of these as a return line. The other one is actually a return line. Well, we're gonna have to get creative with how this works because this is no longer gonna work for us. It's just not enough flow, but I still wanna retain the ability for me to tell how much gas is left in the tank. We're gonna do what comes natural in my life, which is cut everything apart. Okay, we got a base to work with. All right, so here is the float, or the arm that's gonna tell you just how much fuel's left in here. And what I need to make sure is that this is not in the way of the solution we have planned. So there you go, like that. So full, wow, look at how high that goes. But we know that almost empty is right here. So we also know that pickups have to be kind of right off the base of this line right here. So what I'm gonna do is weld in pieces to pull two pickup tubes right here. So my original intention was to put the AEM fuel pumps in the tank. That's just not gonna fit. But I have these Earls units that are bulkhead connectors for 6AN lines. The bulkhead, which is the fuel tank, is gonna go between the bolt and the nut right there, and then fluid can pass through that. Me being me and being crazy, I know that this is a 3/8 inch internal diameter. I bought a 7/16, which is slightly bigger, and I'm going to attempt to weld this to that. We will find out together. My intention is to weld this to that and then have just a nice pickup tube going to the bottom of the tank. So nothing is in the tank anymore. We can run nice solid power lines outside of the tank to there, not worry about anything leaking, and then we'll weld this to the aluminum bulkhead and zero leaks whatsoever, right? That should be the case, I hope. Hi. These are very expensive bongo sticks. A lot of time has passed since the camera was last on, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it was pretty torrential downpour of profanity, and that would have been fun for you guys. It was not for me. I was able to weld this thin, which is 0.035, which is smaller than what you're normally supposed to weld. This machine kicks ass, but I was able to successfully create a very solid connection between the end of this and this. Found a million different ways to try and hold it and give it good ground. Melted this a couple times and then finally figured out a good process. So what you've seen is me grind it down a little bit, and the reason why, I'll show you. Grinded it down, so look at that. It fits within spec, and I can get a nut off around it. And something you're gonna also notice is all these teeth are all messed up. That's actually not from the welding at all. That's from this step here. I also drilled a hole out here and tried making it as small as possible, but as you can tell, the teeth didn't like that on there. Long story short, it's going in like such, still a little tight, which is the goal. Once it's all the way down, we got a nice 6AN fitting right there. What do you want to call it? The female end, whatever the correct gender term is nowadays, is smaller than this flange, so it fits in there without hitting this, which is perfect. This side is going to take the nut, and then I'll tack weld the nut, which is why you'll see on the back side here, I left two little spots ground down so I can tack weld whichever is available, whichever kind of comes out here, I'll tack weld it on. Jarrett brought up a really good point and saved my ass on accident. The vast majority of this stuff is like some sort of composite metal. This thing is some sort of steel, but it is not magnetic in this area. It's magnetic on the edge. It makes no sense whatsoever. So I cannot weld this flange to this, which was the original goal. What I'm gonna do is use JB Weld, which is compatible with the 85 and all the others, but it's gonna be JB Weld with a nice compression between the nuts, and then I'm gonna tack weld the nut on, and it's not going anywhere after that. So I said it, didn't I?
You did say it.
I said it.
You said it.
I just saw a meme about things not going anywhere. I'm gonna continue cutting the second hole. It's gonna be kind of in this area right here, but that'll give us the two feed lines. Let's go over to the tank and look at the other challenges. So you can see the blue, the green, and the black, all three of these fittings. Those are the existing fittings, and they're gonna stay on the bulkhead for that gas tank there. So that right there is the fuel filter, but it's also the fuel pressure regulator. So we're gonna simplify that a little bit, but not tons. But you can see, look at all these lines above it. Those are the ones that go to the two saddlebag tanks. back and forth. There's some evap shit, and then even that massive pipe all the way to the back, that's when you fill up the gas, it goes to both tanks. So a lot of weird shit going on here. We're gonna focus primarily on the left side of the screen and try and get fuel pumps to fit over there. This is just a fraction of how complex this fuel system had to get. A, for providing 2 pumps, and B, for having saddlebag tanks. Not worth it. Corvettes are not worth it. Even though I've added a couple pieces, it's actually starting to simplify a little bit, and it starts with all of the work we've done here. So these are 2 6AN lines that are gonna go in line with the existing hard lines, like this. So those are the 2 siphoning lines. We'll adjust those to go further into the tank. Each of those come out to hoses on each of these. My goal is to keep the pumps as low to the ground as possible so the fuel kind of pours into them instead of having to work for it. There you go for those 2. One of these lines connects up to the saddlebag tank. The other line, though, is going to need one of these. So I am converting one of these lines, take this little plastic piece off, right? And then converting this line to this kind of slick 6AN there, which then allows me basically to make a hose line. I'll show you under the car, but because of the fuel filter shenanigans, that's my best solution. Then, like I said, this is where things get weird. So this will be the pump in the back of the car. There is the feed line to the saddlebag tank. That line right in front of us is, I think, the return. So that's just kind of a closed loop thing going over there. Otherwise, this turns into a hose, goes into this Y splitter, goes to the fuel filter, goes to the front of the car. This one, much simply, other line goes to here. I'm gonna need to get 8AN set up here, both there and go. So that's what I'm about to set up right now. Poor Jared doesn't get this cool view right now, but I've got the fuel filter finally disassembled, and you see the green line on the top, not the one that's connected at the very top, but the one behind the fuel filter. That's the feed line to the other tank, and then the other one right there, that one's the return. So that the only one that's connected in still has a connection to the tank. There's the tank hole right there. So that one goes back to the tank. These other 3 are an issue. That green one at the top, that's actually 5/16. It's not 3/8 like I thought it was. So it's slightly smaller, so I need to get a different adapter for that. I'm gonna take this entire fuel filter off, and you can see the feed line for it right there. Well, that's gonna be a return line now. So that's a 3/8 return line, so I'm gonna pop that off, and then I'm gonna mount actually one of the pumps. I'm gonna mount maybe both of the pumps right there. They're a little higher than I wanted. You know, you can actually see I had to look down to go to the inlet of the tank. So they're gonna be above the very bottom of the tank. But remember, there's 2 tanks. They'll be running in without a vacuum for 3/4 of a tank until the very last of this tank, and I don't want to run them that low anyway. With that fuel filter off, I'm gonna use this one. It's the longer style connection, but it allows me to handle the fact that that nib, or whatever that is right there, but it allows me to just avoid the fact that that's just too big. With that right there, this piece should place like that. So we'll tighten that up, but there we go. So we've converted this to a 6AN piece. Unfortunately, the G&J fitting, which was much smaller and more compact, will not work with General Motors lines. So that line is actually going to be a return line. That was the feed line, but that's a 3/8 inside diameter line that's coming back to the fuel tank. And this is how you overly complicate such a simple concept, but this is the beginning. I have all these hoses I got from G&J, and while they're an awesome local vendor, these are very inflexible. What you can see here is both of the feed lines for the 2 fuel pumps are facing towards me, which is counterintuitive at first, but I'll explain in a second. They both go up to the Y, and they go to the fuel filter, and the fuel filter then sends it on to the front of the car. The only reason I did it this way, because you're looking at, here's the fuel tank, so now I have to run from the tank to the back side of those pumps, because these are the outlets, was so that way I could access all of the electronic aspects of this. And really just this is the more complicated thing. I originally was gonna have them the other way and then just deal with the fact that I'd have to get the electronics on the other side. That is such a long fuel filter. It's a sick fuel filter. It flows an insane amount of flow. It's so long that I could not get it to run across here without making some modifications because I have all these other fittings on there. That was an issue. And then I thought for sure I could get it to run along the torque tube down there. That was a lie. The torque tube doesn't have enough room for that with the Y fittings to fit on out there. I do like that these are the ones that are back here, because once this whole rear suspension comes back up, none of this is going to be really accessible. So I like the idea that it is sturdy. I'm going to have to put this back on, and even though this hose is falling down, this is one of the two that are going from the tank to the back side of these. So I need to make the other one, and then also you'll see right there, see that little guy right there, blue guy, that's going to go up, back up here, feed through the frame, and then also go here. So this is a return line from the other tank. Blue guy ends up being return line from the front of the car, and then these 1 and 2 are feed lines for the pumps. And so those 2 more lines finish off the mess of pumps back here. All of that together, that should really make me never have to worry about E85 ever again. That's a lie too. I'm still gonna have to worry about it. If there was any question about the difference between the Earl's Ultra Pro and this product here, the ability of this hose is just impressive, absolutely impressive. So definitely take that into consideration, because these are not forgiving. I'm literally trying to bend them right now, and you can see them just a little bit. There's not much give into those. It's already confusing enough, but because there's 2 tanks, there's going to be a return line, which we're going to reuse this as a return line from the front of the car. We have 1 feed line, we need a second feed line, and then we have a return from the other side of the tank, which is annoying. We don't need this one anymore. So we're going to cut this one off and then turn that into the second hole that we're going to drill through for here. See how like part of this is like sparking and part of it isn't? There's like weird, like a variety of metals in this thing. Thanks to Grease Monkey gloves, I've realized 2 things when trying to fit something this big inside of a hole that small. 1, use protection, and 2, use lube. I'm just gonna dip this in here. Start. Time for the big kahuna. I went out and bought this one specifically because this is a 9/16, so it's larger than a 1/2 inch. For those of you guys looking at 6AN lines and bulkheads, 1/2 inch is just not big enough. My concern isn't that the hole's overlapping it, it's that the nut on the inside doesn't interact with the seal. So what we'll probably have to do is, once we JB weld everything in, we'll clearance the nut, and then we'll literally shave off part of it. It's not going to go anywhere, but just that way we don't hit the edge and cause sealing issues. Clean up this even more and get it ready for tactical insertion. All right, so we now have 2 holes. This thing sits up like this almost. This one's gonna go here, and then this one will go in here. I'm gonna go ahead and put the nuts on both of these. I'm gonna get JB Weld set up, and we're just gonna fix those in there. Then, once they're all set, we'll drop these both down. Quick shout out to my buddy Brian from Brian's Mobile One, who showed this on his Instagram randomly, and it makes for a perfect little base to hold JB Weld. So we're gonna make sure we leave no stone unturned on this process, because gas and oil love to find a way. It's like Jurassic Park. Life finds a way. Put it in like that. A beautiful one of that. All of this to retain the stock gas levels sending unit. That's all I'm trying to do. I purposely have the pipe bent in the direction that the tank needs to go, which is like this. That JB Weld is definitely sealing this quite nicely. I'm trying to let the audience know that this stuff is impenetrable. It's not going to move. So considering that I would love to have made this out of aluminum, even though it's steel, we're in a better spot than I thought we would be. These pieces are clearly the JB Weld's going to seal that. It's nice and clean and even, and I've got the nuts on the inside. It's not as pretty on the inside, but it's still pretty functional. I'm going to tack weld those spots right there and there once the JB Weld sets, so that way the nuts don't even move, nothing breaks off. You can see I already started annealing and then bending this one. My goal is to get both of them to the bottom of this, so we've got a little bit of work ahead of us. We're going to let these set first and then start the bending, and we'll get better bending out here, and they'll both kind of sit somewhere in there, I'm hoping. So with the wave track installed, the new axles cut and figured out. That was a little challenge by itself. We're gonna go ahead and throw the diff back on. It's 5 in the morning because it still stays so damn hot out here. All the fuel system is, as you just saw, which is filmed over like 2 months. This has been horrible. This is gonna go up on there first. I think we're gonna start taking apart the rear subframe piece by piece, but we're gonna skip through all this for you guys. We're just putting everything back together. Jarrett pulled this cable way too far, and in that sense actually made my life infinitely easier. This is welding cable, and so 8 gauge at that. And I didn't want to run 2 wires because, you know, more problems can happen to 2 wires. We have 1 wire, and this is the most professional thing you'll ever see. Jarrett did the connectors inside of here, so he's becoming a full-blown electrician. Sick. No big deal. And then we put these boots that came on it from AEM. That's probably the most professional thing you'll ever see come out of the shop. I put heat shrink over that, and then we're gonna do an infamous 2-to-1 splice. Only downside to what I've done, and I'm aware of it ahead of time, this is amazing copper wire. It's super cheap. If you guys are ever looking to run battery cables inside of the car, I would strongly recommend using welding cable. It's very fine. And this is Chinese, and the reason why, you see how it's all silver on the ends? It's because these are actually aluminum wire, good old copper attached to the outside. Why does that matter so much? Makes it harder for these to be soldered, and that's what we're about to do. So we're taking all the dull hair, and we're gonna just, you even see the color difference already. More than likely, you're gonna stab yourself at least once doing this. And you'll generally see there's like, everybody's gonna argue, but at the end of the day, tons of people still do every way. This is one of the most highly recommended ways of doing this. And then we're gonna go ahead and solder this. Doing it from the top, I understand. Just can't hold all these at once. I'm sure with enough welding or soldering, you actually add resistance. I'm sure there's tons of studies on all of that. Oh, that's too much solder. Wow, that's like I just welded those wires together. That's a little unnecessary on my part. Okay. There. This is probably the 7th wardrobe change, indicating about 3 weeks of this video taking place. We've got the whole rear end back on. Every single bolt is loose, true Dahm special, but all the tires are on the car. And now it's time to tighten up the front. And by that, I mean the AN lines, all the Holly lines that we have up here. We're gonna go ahead and tighten these up, fill the car full of gas, and see the first time this car has ever operated with a fuel pressure regulator circling back through the whole car. So let's see if we can get that to work. Just tighten all these back on. These were all hand tight to begin with. This is probably one of the greatest feelings in the world, is having a fuel system that just is solid. Start to finish. It's a little complicated in the back because it has to be, but fuel is no fucking joke. We're gonna have to replace this hose at some point, and I actually have the fittings to do that, because this hose is not E85 compatible. Okay, all AN lines are connected. I'm gonna take the gas that was in the tank, pour it back into the tank, and then we're gonna test the fuel system. Not dry, but wet. We're gonna go ahead and turn the key to on, and we should see our sensors come online. Okay. Oh, that's the water pump. Coolant temp. We have negative 14.7 fuel pressure. That's not right. So we might be having an issue with our fuel pressure sensor itself, saying 1 atmospheric pressure or below. It's like absolute 0 or something right now. We'll deal with that in a second. What we are gonna do is, here is the line that ultimately gets connected to the power system, but we're gonna short circuit it to test the fuel pumps. No idea, this is literally the first moment on camera. Here we go. Oh, they're picking up fuel, and fuel pressure gauge is going up.
It's working?
It's working. Let me see if we have any fuel to the car. So far none. There's a lot of air in that system. It's all fresh, okay. You can hear it. Now adjusting for the correct type of sensor, we were off by 14.9. We're sitting here at 0 PSI. We're gonna go ahead and fire this up. And with the fuel pressure regulator set in the rough range, there we are at 45 PSI. Adjustable with that Allen wrench. That sounds so weird with the 2 tank thing. Let's do this again. Okay, so we're gonna work a teamwork effort to show you that this is now adjustable with the fuel pressure regulator right here. So Jared's gonna go ahead and turn the fuel system on. And then I'm gonna go ahead and adjust this and go ahead and look at the numbers. I'm increasing it. You should see it increasing.
51.
Yep. And I'm gonna decrease.
50. 49.
Yep.
48.
There we go. We now, guys, have a traditional fuel system for a Rotary. It is time. Tomorrow's video, we are firing this car up. It's getting fired up. More oil, more fuel, more actual fuel in the tank because I can hear air going through it because we have next to no fuel in the tank. It's all happening next.